folks, and welcome aboard Great Chesterford Junction Model Railway. I've got a bit of an update for you on things that have been happening on the railway, and those things are nothing really visually, more about getting it to run better, I suppose, more efficiently. And so I'll show you what's been going on. One of the major changes is this turnout over here. Originally in here I had a large radius Pico turnout, but it was an old one, and what that meant was that the gap in the frog area here, from the point of the frog or the toe of the frog to the next rail contact, the distance in there was 14 millimeters. So now with this replacement turnout, we've reduced that gap significantly. So this is a scratch built turnout, and the gap here now has been reduced from 14 millimeters down to 10 millimeters. It's quite a significant change, and this is a homemade turnout, and it's based on a Pico template that was downloaded off the internet. You'll notice that there are rail gaps here and here. They effectively isolate the whole frog area here. This is a live frog, and it's switched by a micro switch underneath the board, which is activated by the point lever. So it switches to the correct polarity depending on which way the point blades are pointing. So it runs very smoothly, but it's I guess it's a bit of a chore to make it, but it's well worth it, and I found it very satisfying. Another fundamental difference in this turnout compared to the Pico turnout is that the point rails, or the closure rails, are not hinged. It's a continuous rail all the way along here to where it meets the tie bar, which is really good, and it eliminates a problem that you can get, I suppose, with older hinged points with electrical continuity. But you can see here that it moves quite freely, and you can also notice that the gap between the point rail and the stock rail is quite small. All this was done with NMRA gauges and even some KD 3-point gauges. So it's set to NMRA standards now. The wing rails and the check rails are also set to a much narrower gap than what you would find on an old Pico turnout. Now, building this turnout to the NMRA standards means that your wheel standards also have to be spot on. The NMRA gauge that I used for the track build also has other bits and pieces on it that can be used on other parts of the railway, and one of the important things is that it's got a gauge that measures the flanges on the wheels, the distance between the flanges, as opposed to a back-to-back gauge. I find the NMRA gauge easier to use, I think, than a back-to-back gauge. It doesn't seem to make sense really, but you get a much finer setting with the NMRA gauge. So what I found was that when I started checking some of my rolling stock going through the turnout, some of them would lift a wheel because they were out of gauge. And the interesting thing is that I've got older mainline stock. All the mainline stock was in gauge, spot on. Lima, again, all in gauge, spot on, no problems there. So, and obviously a lot of the newer stuff, I've got Daypole, I've got Oxford, what else have I got? I've got some new Hornby, I think. All the new stuff was fine. It just needed a little bit of tweaking in some cases. However, older Hornby was way out. Some of my locos I had to actually ease out the driving wheels to become in gauge, I suppose, or be set to gauge. So that wasn't terribly difficult, but On some of the tender drive locos, I had to actually put a spacer washer on the axle as well, because there was too much sideways movement in the axle now, and what that meant was that it would fall out of contact with the driving gears. So one fix created all these problems. Anyway, I got all that sorted out. That's no problem. Everything runs fine through there now. But yeah, the Bachmann locos were fine. You can put a gauge on them and it's spot on. Yeah, so Hornby was a bit of an issue, but I've got, as I said, I've got those sorted out now. One interesting thing that happened was I've got some old four-wheel coaches. I haven't got them out here at the moment, but the old Hornby four-wheel coaches, and they had the old wheels and axles in them. You remember the square axles with the wide wheels? They don't travel through the new Turnout. So I thought I'd get some replacement wheels, some new ones. And so I bought a packet of the Hornby disc wheels, I think they were. Yes, anyway, I got some new Hornby wheels and brought them home, and you get a pack of 10, and I checked every one of them with the NMRA gauge, and it was just slightly out of gauge, brand new. So they were reset. It was only a fraction, and put into the coaches, and they run fine now. Now I also needed some additional wheels, so I wanted to change over some wheels on some of my freight stock. So this time I bought some Bachmann wheels, a packet of 10, and checked them with the gauge. They're all spot on, absolutely spot on, every single one of them. So what's going on, Hornby? Yeah, anyway, that's just the way it goes. Now I might show you what I needed to actually scratch build a Turnout, and I must say that I just didn't do it off my own bat. I saw a number of tutorials on YouTube. If you just type in how to scratch build a Turnout, and quite a number of options will come up, and most of them are pretty good. There was one guy that I won't name that I started watching, and I thought, oh, this looks pretty good. And then at one stage he said with the frog on the Turnouts that he builds, at the toe of the frog, the pointy bit, he always files it down. He files the point down towards the gap. And I thought, that's crazy. That's sort of defeating the purpose. But he reckons his wheels run over it much better. I can't see it myself. I think that's totally wrong. So I stopped watching that video. But the others I've watched, I've picked and chosen bits and pieces from their methods to suit the way that I work. A very helpful, it wasn't actually a video, a very helpful site was the Gauge O Guild in England, and they've got very detailed instructions that you can get as a PDF. They've got very detailed instructions that about their methods for building O-gauge points. Now the size or the gauge of the point doesn't really matter, it's the methods that we want. And one thing that I got from them was that they have created a straight edge with a bulldog clip, although I didn't use a bulldog clip, but they had a straight edge that they line up with the frog rail and the approaching closure rail, so that you get it perfectly lined up. So that was very helpful actually. So yeah, it doesn't matter about the gauge. You can even watch tutorials about end gauge building points or turnouts, and they're very good as well. So anyway, I'll show you some of the stuff that I needed to make this thing. Right, the critical thing you need is this NMRA gauge. This is the stainless steel gauge produced by the NMRA, and it's got all of the necessary pieces on there to check the gauge of track, the gauge of check rails, like the gap in between the stock rail and the check rail, wing rails, the gap between the wing rail and the point rail, all that sort of stuff. There's even a couple of height. Here we have the flange check just on this part. It comes with a, I'll just zoom out a bit, comes with a full set of instructions. on what all the different pieces do, and that's how it comes in a packet. So it's the Mark V, this one. So there you go. The other thing I got was these KD track gauges. This is a dual gauge. It's for code 83 and code 100. It's just a matter of turning it over from one side to the other. I used code 100 actually, and I've got 3 of these. And basically I use them to hold track in gauge while I'm soldering one end of it, and then I move my way along. You can move them all about. Yeah, they're very good. So a very handy tool. The other thing I've got, and I've sort of worked this out from the Gauge O Guild. Now these are the two, let's call them a gauge or a jig or whatever you want. It's just flat aluminium. It's 1mm thick, and I use this to hold against the frog rail, and then push up against the closure rail that's coming up, to keep them all lined up properly. And then I'll stand the other one up in between the wing rail and the frog rail to keep it engaged. So this is the gauge I'm using, or the gap if you like, for my check rails and my wing rails. So 1mm. I think it's slightly more than the NMRA gauge, but it's very effective. The other thing is you need a set of wheels, bogey, whatever. It's got to be in gauge, and you can use this just to roll along the turnout as you're building it to see how you're going and making sure that everything's moving properly as it should. Now, of course, you also need flat files, needle files. I use a Dremel cutting disc to cut rail brakes and all that sort of thing. You need PCB sleepers. I cut my own sleepers with a mini table saw. You've got to be very careful with that and wear a dust mask, and the saw has actually got a dust extraction accessory on it, so I connect it up to a industrial vacuum cleaner, so we don't want any dust from that. What haven't I mentioned? Yeah, a flat piece of board. Now the critical word there is flat. I used a piece of MDF, however, to keep it absolutely flat I've used an old wood plane, and I've taken the blade and the handle off and everything and turned it upside down in the vise, and then I've clamped the piece of MDF to the wood plane, which is absolutely flat. It makes it easy because I've got it clamped in the vise, and it makes it easy to work on things there. You need an appropriate template. I can show you some templates actually. This is a Fast Tracks template that you can download from their website, free, and you have to actually join it together. It's that big. This is about 350mm long. This is a number 8 turnout. And it's got all the clearly marked areas on it, where the wing rails go and where the rail brakes go in the PCB sleepers and everything. They're very good, excellent. And this is a Pico template I downloaded, and I've got to make another curved turnout. This time it'll be a right hand, so I'll use one of these templates and recolor it and everything and get it to the way I want it before I start working. I've downloaded a Pico template for a double slip. Was that a single? No, that's a single actually. But I've found that it doesn't match my double slip tie bars, so I'm going to have to work out a different way to do double slips that I've got, because they're an older type. So I've actually scanned one, and obviously I need to change the colour on that, but yeah. So anyway, these are all future projects, so we'll see how we go with that. I can show you some slides of part of the build, and yeah, we can work through that. Well, that Turnout build was a major project, and fortunately it worked out really well, and it operates superbly. So there'll be more to come of those. Um, the other thing that I've done just recently is a major upgrade to the, let's call it the operating system here, with controllers and block instruments, all that sort of stuff, basically to make things easier. Yeah, I guess easier would be the word. What I've done is I've added a handheld walk around corded controller to each of the three stations: Great Chesterford Junction, Little Bardfield and Bamford. And the reason for this is to allow the operator to be able to get up with the handheld and look around the dividing wall basically that we've got here, which separates the railway to a certain extent. So the operator can get up and walk around and see other parts of the railway, especially if he's driving the train from one of those areas to, say, Little Bardfield, for example. To explain this better, I think we probably need a drawing. Right, the way this railway works is with instruments, block instruments for the branch line. And the branch line has 2 stations on it, 3 if you count Great Chesterford Junction, and each of those branch stations is separated by isolated sections. So if we just take one of the isolated sections, say between Little Bardfield and Bamford, so we'll have a rail, a continuous rail, that's Little Bardfield, and this is Bamford up here, and in between we've got a shed at the back where you can't see the track actually. Now the second rail that goes between these destinations has a break in it. 2 breaks actually. Now what happens is that there's block instruments at each one of these destinations, and the block instruments talk to each other to organise the movement of trains through this area. So the original system was that Little Bardfield would contact Bamford via his instrument if he wanted to move a train from here to there. He would contact Little Bardfield with one ring of the bell on his instrument, and Bamford would reply with one ring of the bell to say, yes, I'm listening. And if Little Bardfield wanted to move a mixed goods, he would contact Bamford to see if the line was clear and that he could do that. And the way he would do that was be 3 rings of the bell, which tells us that that's the code for a mixed goods train. What he's asking with 3 rings of the bell is the line clear and can I send you a mixed goods? Bamford, if the line is clear, replies with 3 bells and tells Little Bardfield that the line is clear by setting his instrument to line clear, which shows up on Little Bardfield's instrument. It'll light up that the line is clear. So then Little Bardfield decides to send his train up to Bamford. So once he sets the train in motion with his controller, he notifies Bamford with 2 rings on the bell on Bamford's box that the train is online, and Bamford confirms that by 2 bells and moving his instrument to train online, which then closes that brake. The switch in the box closes that brake. So Bamford has got control of the line from here all the way through to there. What it requires though is that Little Bardfield has set his controller at a certain speed, and Bamford has to match that speed with his controller when the train passes over this brake. Now that's where the fundamental flaw is, and it's not necessarily a flaw, but quite often here you'll get a mismatch of controller speeds, and you might get the train surge as it goes across that brake. Once it's in that section, Little Bardfield can notify Bamford that the train has left his section by ringing the bell 2 and then 1 and setting his instrument to line blocked. Once the train has moved into the Bamford section, Bamford will do the same and 2 rings of the bell and then 1 ring of the bell, and then sets his instrument to line blocked. Now that's the old method. So I thought the problem here is the surging, and I wanted to change the system so that that doesn't happen, and this is why we've got the walk around controllers. So now if we go back to the new system, can we still see that? Yes, we can. So we've still got our single rail here. We've got Little Bardfield, we've got the shed, and we've got Bamford up here. We've still got our rail brakes, like so, like that. The way I've changed it now is that if Little Bardfield wants to send that mixed goods train, Little Bardfield will contact Bamford with 1 ring on the box. Bamford replies with 1 ring to say, yes, I'm listening. Little Bardfield then poses the question, can I send you a mixed goods train and is the line clear? So that's 3 rings of the bell. Bamford replies, because the line is clear, with 3 bells, and sets his instrument to line clear, which shows up at Little Bamford. Now this is where we change. When Little Bardfield is ready to send a train, instead of using his controller, he leaves his controller off and just notifies Bamford that the train is online, and then sets his instrument to train online, which closes that break. Bamford replies with its 2 bells to say the train is online, and he sets his instrument to train online as well, which closes that break. So now effectively we've got either one of those controllers can operate that section of track, and because Little Bardfield will leave his controller off, Bamford will turn his on and drive the train all the way to Bamford. Now when the train has left the Little Bardfield section here, Little Bardfield will contact Bamford with 2 bells and 1 and set his instrument to line blocked, which means it doesn't affect Bamford at all. They just drive the train all the way up here until he gets into his own section and sets his instrument to line blocked, and he's done that because he's rung 2 bells and 1 to let Little Bardfield know he's done the same thing. So what this requires though is that Bamford needs to be able to have his handheld controller doing this operation, and he needs to be able to look around the wall at Little Bardfield to see the train actually depart. And so that's how I'm using the handheld controllers. So this is the Little Bardfield controller, and there's a switch on the panel here which switches between Little Bardfield and Great Chesterford, which means Little Bardfield turns that one on, Great Chesterford turns that off, turns that on. So it's similar on the other 2 stations. We'll just have a look at those. This is Bamford, a slightly different setup. The control switch for the Bamford handheld is here, and the panel one is still set in and still active here. And the Great Chesterford, we've got our handheld mounted just over there, and it's plugged in over here, and there's a switch to activate it or turn it off. Now this one's slightly different. So what's happened here is that this handheld initially has been set up here for a while and only was used to operate the yard at Great Chesterford and bring in trains from the fiddle yards, Newmarket and Duxford, and so that's the only role it played. And it was possible to also do the same thing on this inbuilt yard controller on the panel. The fundamental difference was that the panel controller also operated the cab control, which means that any part of the railway could be controlled from this panel here. The handheld didn't have that luxury. It only worked on the yard. So yesterday it was all the wiring was redone for this particular handheld. So now that once it's switched on, it turns off the panel controller, and the handheld can now operate all parts of the railway, which means, especially this one, which is the branch line, this handheld can be used to bring a train in from Little Bardfield, for example, and the operator can walk to the end of the wall and have a look around and watch the train depart from Little Bardfield. So this is the end of the visual barrier that I'm talking about, the wall, and I'll just show you what I can do now. If I grab the handheld controller from Great Chesterford Junction, it brings me right up here. If I hold it in my left hand and turn around, I can see I've got a clear view to Little Bardfield. On the other hand, if I grab the controller from Bamford, I can do the same thing. I can walk up here and I can see Little Bardfield. Now if I go around to Little Bardfield, if we just turn the camera around a bit, just a little bit, I can grab the controller from Little Bardfield, and now I'm out here looking down towards Great Chesterford or Bamford. So that's made a huge difference in the operation. So that's where we are at the moment, folks. I mean, there's still other stuff to do. I've got things to finish off and build and all sorts of things. So it'll keep me going for a while. Anyway, all the best to you. See you next time. Cheers. Gourmet.